So this morning I preached on the Lord of Time, dealing with God's delays. The reality that He works in a different time zone than we do. This evening I want to preach part 2 of that sermon, the Lord of Time, part 2, and I want to talk about restored time. Now in 1582, Pope Gregory XIII commissioned a new calendar to be instituted in the place of the Julian calendar. This was going to be the Gregorian calendar. And the reason that it had to be replaced was the formula it used to calculate leap years wasn't accurate. And so it took more than 300 years for all the various countries around the world to switch from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. And it wasn't until September of 1752 that America actually changed its calendar. I want to show you what the calendar looked like for the month of September in 1752. I don't know if you can recognize anything wrong with that. So show the next image. Obviously, it goes September 1 and 2, and then it just skips just a whole bunch of... Can you imagine if your birthday is on anybody's birthday on the 3rd through the 13th of September? Yeah, well, 1752, you guys cannot count that year. You would have missed your birthday. You would have gone to sleep on September 2nd and woken up on September 14th. Probably the longest nap you've ever had. 11 days are missing from the month of September that year. They are lost forever. And the reason why is because they had lost the days actually over the course of the years of the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar and the miscalculation of leap years. So they had to make up for those days that they had lost, and they decided to do it all at one time. But I want you to just grasp in your mind that those days are gone forever, right? You would have woken up, you would have gone to sleep on Wednesday the 2nd and woken up on Thursday the 14th. And those days in between, you could never get them back. It was definite. There was no 11th of September that year or 10th of September that year. It was completely gone. How many of you know life can feel like that sometimes?
Amen.
Not just the days are missing. Sometimes weeks or months or years are missing from our lives. We're looking at our lives and we're kind of going, where did the last couple of years of my life go?
Amen.
Where did that decade go? I don't understand. It's like I fell asleep and woke up and it was all gone. It was just a whole nother decade. We can sit back and wonder where they went. How did they slip away? And these lost years can be times of great regret in our life. They can actually leave you with a sense of hopelessness. So I want to look at this reality from the Word of God this evening. And I want to look at a specific time in Israel's history. The people of God were in rebellion, and He judges them by sending what He calls His army, my great army of locusts. He sends them upon the land, and these locusts come in and they devour every living thing in sight. They absolutely devastate the landscape. And then God brings about an encouraging word in the midst of all of this loss and tremendous loss that they experience. So let's look at Joel 2 verses, we'll start in verse 21. Fear not, O land, be glad and rejoice, for the Lord has done marvelous things. Do not be afraid, you beasts of the field. For the open pastures are springing up, and the tree bears its fruit. The fig tree and the vine yield their strength. Be glad then, you children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God, for He has given you the former rain faithfully. And He will cause the rain to come down for you, the former rain and the latter rain in the first month. The threshing floors shall be full of wheat, and the vats shall overflow with new wine and oil. So I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten, the crawling locust, the consuming locust, and the chewing locust, my great army which I sent among you. You shall eat in plenty, and be satisfied, and praise the name of the Lord your God, who has dealt wondrously with you, and my people shall never be put to shame. Mm-hmm. Let's begin this evening by talking about the locust years. Because in our text, God is speaking to a nation whose harvest is completely destroyed by locusts. And it's like these waves of locusts. Well, one wave didn't eat, the next wave ate, and then the next wave after that. He says the chewing locust left something, but the swarming locust came and taken that, and what the swarming locust left, don't worry, the crawling locust came and chewed that up. Have you ever felt like that in your life? Like, it's like, okay, how much more can be eaten from my life? And then all of a sudden, oh, I guess that could be as well. And it's just like one thing after another. So you can imagine the Israelites watching this and going, well, at least the chewing locust left something. No, because the swarming locusts are coming. Oh, at least they left something. Nope, don't worry about that. The crawling locusts are going to come. And they're going to basically, and then the last one is called the consuming locust, which means there'll be nothing left. Absolutely nothing left. Waves of attack, swarms of locusts consumed everything in sight. This would have caused incredible economic hardship, trouble for all of the people. There's no food. There's no way to sell food or anything to barter with. People are going hungry. There's famine. Joel 1:2 says, hear this, you elders, and give ear, all you inhabitants of the land. Has anything like this happened in your days, or even in the days of your father? That's the devastation we're talking about. They're sitting there going, come on, man, nothing like this has ever happened before. This is really bad. And then it goes on to describe how everyone is mourning this tragedy, this devastating loss. The land mourns because the grain is cut off. The priests mourn because there's no grain or drink offering. Watch how this affects everything. The farmers are ashamed because their harvest is perished. And then it says the vine dressers are ashamed because there's nothing on the vines. The animals groan. The cattle and sheep because they have no pasture. The beasts because they have no water. Even the drunkards are weeping because the wine's been cut off. I mean, everybody's affected by this, right? From religious to drunks, they're all affected by what the locusts have consumed. Everyone is suffering. Everyone is mourning. Nobody has managed to escape the devastation. Now, if you'll remember, back in Exodus, this was the 8th plague of 10 released by Moses, or by God in Egypt through Moses. And the Bible says this, verse 14 and 15 of Exodus 10, and the locusts went up over all the land of Egypt, rested on all the territory of Egypt. They were very severe. For they covered the face of the whole earth, so that the land was darkened, and they ate every herb of the land, and all the fruit of the trees which the hail had left. So there remained nothing green on the trees or on the plants of the field throughout all the land of Egypt. You know, as I was researching this, I learned a number of scary facts about locusts. A single swarm of locusts can be larger than 40 billion insects, covering up to 400 square miles. Why don't you think about that? A single swarm of locusts can be up to or more than 40 billion insects, covering 400 square miles. That's a lot of space. 400 square miles. Can you imagine 200 miles this way and 200 miles this way? It's 400 square miles covered by locusts. A swarm that large can eat more in one day. In one day, they can eat more than 40,000 people can eat in a year. One day. This swarm of locusts of 40 billion can eat more in one day than 40,000 people can eat in 1 year. I mean, we're talking about devastation. Immediate. In one day, all the food for 40,000. How many people are in this city? 25,000?
Yeah, right. Almost a million.
1 million people. Okay, so 1 million people. Can you imagine? In 40,000, that's 20, what is this, 24 days, all the food that Edmonton could eat for 1 year is gone in 24 days, less than a month. All the food that the people of Edmonton could eat, unless Canadians eat like exceptionally more than the average person. I eat exceptionally more, but I'm an American, so. I read an article, it was a first-hand account of what it was 1874. They called it the Year of Locusts in America, and this article was by Chuck Lyons, and he was doing research on this, the Year of the Locust, 1874, and he found first-hand accounts of this locust storm that descended on the place. Let me just listen to what it says, because the swarm of locusts came into America, and they swept across the Great Plains, and this is how it was described. Late one July morning in 1874, 12-year-old farm girl Lily Marks watched the sunlight dim and a peculiar darkness sweep over the Kansas sky. A whirring, rasping sound followed, and there appeared, as she later recalled, a moving gray screen between the sun and the earth. Then something dropped from the cloud like hail, hitting her family's house, trees, and picket fence. A child in Jefferson County, Kansas, who had gone out at midday to draw water from the well, exclaimed, "They're here! The sky is full of them! The whole yard is crawling with the nasty things." A settler in Edwards County, Kansas, reported, "I never saw such a sight before. This morning as we looked up toward the sun, we could see millions in the air. They looked like snowflakes." What Marx described as a, quote, moving, struggling mass of grasshoppers, technically Rocky Mountain locusts, had invaded the Great Plains. Farmers, their pant legs clinched with string, ran to cover their valuable wells. In many cases, their drinking water was about the only thing they could save. As the swarms landed on houses, fields, and trees, the skies cleared, but then the real devastation began. The locusts soon scoured the fields of crops, the trees of leaves, every blade of grass, the wool off of sheep, the harnesses off of horses, the paint off of wagons, and the handles off of pitchforks. They washed in waves against fences, piling a foot or more deep. They feasted for days, even devouring the clothing and quilts that farmhands threw protectively over their vegetable gardens. Livestock feasted on the locusts, and farm families killed many of the invaders by building bonfires. But there were just too many of the nasty things for the man or beast to control. The locust farmers grimly quipped that the locusts had eaten everything but the mortgage. Shoot, I would have brought that mortgage right outside for those locusts to eat. Here you go, boys. Take it away. In places, the massive insects blocked out the sun for as long as 6 hours. Wow. And when the locusts did descend, they covered every shrub, plant, and tree, sometimes breaking limbs with their combined weight. They flattened and devoured corn stalks and reaped fields of grain. The locusts picked clean whole watermelon patches and stripped fruit trees, leaving peach pits dangling from empty branches. Having ravaged the fields and trees, the locusts then invaded the farmers' houses, clearing out barrels and cupboards and devouring anything not secreted away in wood or metal containers. They even shredded curtains and clothing. At night, farm families had to shake bedding to dislodge grasshoppers before retiring and considering themselves lucky if another shaking was not needed before the morning. The air, quote, "the air is literally alive with them," a New York Times correspondent wrote from Kansas. They beat against the houses, swarm in at the windows, cover the passing trains. They work as if sent to destroy. In June of 1875, Albert Child, who was a county judge and sometime meteorologist in Plattsmouth, Nebraska, observed one huge swarm as it passed overhead, and by telegraphing for reports from surrounding towns and timing the rate of movements as the insects streamed for 5 days, he estimated the swarm was some 1,800 miles long and 110 miles wide. And based on this data, he calculated they covered an astonishing 198,000 square miles. The locusts of 1874 had infested an estimated 2 million square miles by comparison. So think about this. It's utter devastation. There's no rest for it. You can't even get away from them when you go to sleep. You think you can protect things by covering them? Nope, we're going to eat through that as well. And it's interesting that our text seems to speak to something more than fruits and vegetables and plants and trees, right? As brutal and devastating as that was, God speaks to them not about just the restoration of plants and trees, but he speaks to them in relation to time. You ever wondered, why does he say you restore the years that the locusts eaten? How did the locusts eat years? Didn't they eat plants? But yet in his comment to them, I will restore the years that the swarming locusts have eaten. In other words, it's not just the harvest they've eaten away time. That the greatest consequence seems to be the time that has been lost through this tragedy. Yes, the fruit is gone, the harvest is gone, but these things can and will return. God will send the rain, and the trees will grow green again. You can plant again, and there will be a new harvest. The grass of the fields will grow back. Animals will be satisfied again at the brook. But all these things they can get back, but what they cannot get back are the lost years. You can get the plants back. You can get the fruit back eventually, but you don't get those years back. And that's what God is addressing. You ever thought to yourself, I wish I could have those years back? Man, if only I could just take that period of my life between 28 and 32 and just fix it. Can I just get it back and have a redo on those years? When I went wild between 18 and 20, could I just get those years back? Could I just... God is giving us a very vivid picture of a person's life and valuable time eaten. And the picture here has to do with the years of the life that have been devoured and gone. And you know, doesn't this explain the fascination with time machines? Amen. I mean, I remember when Back to the Future came out. It wasn't, I mean, the car was cool, but what was cooler was the fact that you could go back and change something. Yeah. And that kind of, I mean, that fascination has been alive in humans for a long time. The idea, I wish I could, you know, what did she sing in the 80s? If I could turn back time. Right? Just that desire of trying to get something back. There's years that have the locusts have devoured from my life. I just wish I could get them back. There's time that has been wasted or lost or consumed by the locusts of life. You know, some years lost are just years that we've wasted. Right? The text is specifically speaking about God's judgment. This context of this is his judgment on a nation because of their rebellion. Sometimes that's the case in our lives. Years wasted because of our rebellion against God. There are years that the locusts of our sin and selfishness devour, consume from our lives. Luke chapter 15, the prodigal son took the father's inheritance, and not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living. I don't know how long he stayed there. I don't know if he wasted a month or 2 months or 5 years or 10 years. I don't know. But the Bible uses the word that he wasted it. Luke 23, there's the thief hanging on the cross next to Jesus. And he says to Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, assuredly I say to you, today you'll be with me in paradise. Praise God. He's saved. He's going to make heaven his home. But guess what? He never had a chance to live for God.
Amen.
Amen.
Sin costs him a whole lifetime of wasted years. And I would say to you, every year without Christ is a wasted year.
Amen.
But sometimes these years are consumed by the locus of laziness.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew 25, the master's depositing a portion of money to each servant. The Bible says he gives one 5 talents, which is a measurement of money. He gives another one 2 talents, and he gives another one 1 talent. And when he came back to bring these servants into an account, the one with 5 and the one with 2 had done very well, but the 1 talent guy buried it, and he's trying to act like, he was just scared, or I was just being careful, I was afraid of you, I just didn't want to lose it because of, and Jesus, he always calls us out, right? What did Jesus say? The Lord answered and said to him, "You wicked and lazy servant." No, you're just lazy. You weren't being careful with my money. You're just lazy. You lost all those years that you could have invested because you're lazy. That's what it is. You're wicked and you're lazy, and your wickedness has led to laziness. Right? That's what we're looking at. The locusts we've wasted years, we've thrown years away, and then sometimes it's just because we're lazy. The locust of laziness has consumed it. I have given you time, but the locust of laziness has consumed it. Sometimes in our laziness, we fail to do what we ought to do. Right? We lose time. One author said, most time is not lost in hours, but in minutes. A bucket with a small hole in the bottom gets just as empty as the bucket deliberately kicked over. But a lot of times it's not that, there's just this just waste. It was just dripping out over time. We're too lazy to plug the bottom of the bucket to stop and fix something that needs to be fixed. Now, I would say that the locus of laziness really represents the reality of our generation.
Amen.
A lot of young men and women just wasting years. I'm fascinated to find out how many hours young men can spend playing video games. Or young women. I mean, I think in Canada, young women play as well. But in America, it's mostly young men that are lazy. But women are fine. But there's so many things that are competing for your time, right? And Solomon, who was the wisest man that ever lived, was constantly warning against laziness in his time. And that got me thinking. Today, there's so many things competing for our time. Lives can be full of lazy activities. Sitting around watching things. We don't want to get up. We don't want to do anything. We're just lazy and we just watch it and it absorbs us. And pretty soon, 8 hours of binge watching goes by. What did I comp? Where did those 8 hours go?
Amen.
They design television shows nowadays so that it just shows the next one and then the next one and then the next one and then the next one. And they design them to keep you watching, and because they're assuming you're just going to be lazy and sit there in front of it, too lazy to press stop. Just let it go. It's fine. Another hour gone. Vegging ourselves to death. Another way our years can be consumed is by the locus of disobedience. Jonah heard from God to go to the Ninevites, but he went the opposite direction. And the reality is that chapters 1 and 2 are just the recording of wasted years of disobedience. That's all it is. Like, they wouldn't even be there if he would have just gone. We wouldn't even know who Jonah is if he would have just gone and did what God told him to do. But 2 whole chapters are just a recording of the history of his wasted years of disobedience. Wasted years all have to do with bad decisions. Years consumed. How many times have you ever thought, man, I could have been further in Christ if only I had repented sooner?
Amen.
I could have saved myself and my family so much suffering. I can never make up for those wasted years. I can never get them back. And I think that one of the greatest judgments on sin is a judgment on our time. And this is what the text is about. You think it's about animals, you think it's about land, you think it's about the plants and the trees and the harvest, but the real judgment has to do with lost time. Donald Whitney said if people threw away their money as thoughtlessly as they throw away their time, we would think them insane. Not all lost years are the result of sin and rebellion, though. There is that element. But sometimes we can lose years in busyness. And busyness is the opposite of laziness. One person said busyness is a cousin to laziness, and it's no more noble than its relative. We think busyness is noble, right? No, I'm just really, really busy. The problem is we get busy doing a lot of inconsequential things.
Amen.
Right? We busy our lives with things that are actually wasting the time of our lives. So much time is lost in doing so much that means nothing. You know, when Luke, in the book of Luke, Jesus is addressing Martha, who is worried about so many things, but he says one thing is needed. One thing is important, but it's been crowded out by many things, right? Jesus is what's important, but you've crowded out Jesus because you're so busy with so many other things. Sometimes we lose years and frankly, we just have no idea where they've gone. But, you know, I mean, let's be honest. It's not disobedience. It's not sin. It's not laziness. It's not just that we're in sin and rebellion or just so busy. It's just we just look back and, I mean, time has a way of flying away and never coming back. It's just like, man, where did that go? What just happened? I don't know. The older I get, the faster time flies.
Amen.
The faster it goes. The more careful you have to be with your time. Because of how much quicker it goes. It doesn't really fit in any particular category, but it just seems to have disappeared. And maybe, you know, maybe you've given yourself to something that seemed important at the time. You know, like you're going to start a business. It seemed important at the time. I'm going to start this business, but 8 years later, you're bankrupt, right? And you just lost 8 years of your time. And it wasn't because you were lazy or busy or doing something. It's just gone. That's what you gave yourself for that period of time. And then it's gone. And it didn't work out the way you thought it would work out. It's just gone. It just disappeared. And this is where we come to in our text of what I will call hope being devoured. Because too much time lost can leave you with a feeling of hopelessness because of the reality that you can never get it back, that you can't turn back time, that you can't go back and redo it. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but a locust swarm wipes out anything and everything. That's what happened in our text. What one left, the next took, and what that left, the next took. They've lost all of these things, but God starts to minister to them about the deeper issue of time and what they've really lost. Time is the most valuable possession that we have. Time is more valuable than money.
Amen.
It's more valuable than resources. It's more valuable than a harvest. Yeah, you can lose your money and get it back. Right? You can lose a lot of things and get them back. Time, you just don't get it back. It's a deeper issue. Time is free, somebody said, but it's priceless. You can't own it, but you can use it. You can't keep it, but you can spend it. Once you've lost it, you can never get it back. So the truth is that we could have a lot of things restored in life, right? One of my favorite shows when I'm traveling is HGTV has this Fixer Upper show. Anybody ever watch the Fixer Upper show? Don't lie. It's that you can watch. Be careful. You can binge watch that one. And the way they set it up on HGTV, it just keeps going to the next episode. Dangerous. Must be disciplined. Watching them fix it, they can take this raggedy old nasty house and restore it. And then it inspires you that someday I might fix the door in my house, you know? It kind of gives me that courage, like I can do this, you know, someday. But, houses can be restored. I saw one the other day on cars where they take these old cars and they restore them. And you could watch on YouTube, they'll do it in like 5 minutes where they do this speed thing and they show where the car starts. And then in 5 minutes, they show the restoration of the car. They're taking off all the parts. It looks really funny. Everything's really fast because it's in time warp speed. And they're showing you the restoration of a car. You can restore a car. You can restore a house. Restore property. Relationships can even be restored. right? You can lose relationships, you can break things in relationships, and they